issues in that southeastern compartment, it's a major amount of water. It basically amounts to about 13% of the groundwater input that comes from Trail Ridge in the first place. One of the ways we can look at this is the USGS has a gauge in Moniac, Georgia, on the north prong of the St. Mary's River. And even under current conditions, the river as it leaves the swamp doesn't flow 3% of the time. That 3% of the time the swamp is in, and it's got such low water levels that there's no surface flow leaving the swamp. Well, if you take that 0.87 cubic feet per second out of the swamp's water budget, the time that this north prong of the St. Mary's doesn't flow goes from 3% of the time to almost 10% of the time, about 9.5% of the time. So you triple the frequency and severity of severe drought in that compartment of the swamp. Well, what does that mean? Well, one thing it means is the swamp is more susceptible to fire. Now, you guys probably all know this, but ironically, the swamp is the source of a lot of wildfire in that part of Georgia. 3 of the biggest wildfires in Georgia history have happened in the swamp in the last 20 years, 2007, 2011, 2017. The 2007 fire cost the Department of Interior $100 million in firefighting costs. It's the most expensive fire in Interior history. It also burned $135 million in commercial timber. So fire is a big problem, and it happens when the swamp is in drought. So we can think about this like, let's say you had a 20-sided dice. Right now, you roll, if you get a 1, you get a drought, maybe a fire. You roll 2 through 20, you don't get anything. Under the mine operations, because of that increased consumptive use, now you get a drought if you roll a 1, 2, or a 3. The longer you keep rolling that dice, the more likely it is that you're going to have a severe drought and a fire. So if mining continues to move north on Trail Ridge and is mined for 25, 30 years, very high likelihood that the mine operations will spur a serious drought and fires. Those droughts will also reduce the amount of time that people can use the water trails to the southern part of the swamp, like to Gannett Lake area and Monkey Lake. And it will change swamp ecology by changing the competitive balance among plants that have different drought tolerances. Now, what's the mine going to do with all that water? They plan to evaporate it to the atmosphere using mechanical evaporators. One of the problems with the mining land use plan right now is that the information that's been supplied to EPD uses test data on evaporators are of a different design than the one they plan to use, and 2 of the 3 tests were done in the desert Southwest in a very different climate. One of my concerns about mining operations in that area is that if we have wet periods or very humid periods, this evaporation is not going to get rid of all the water that's being pumped continuously, and we're going to have some surficial discharges. Right now, the plans have no contingency plan for either monitoring where, if and where those overflows occur, what would be monitored if they did occur. And so right now, one of the deficiencies in the mining land use plan is we don't have any backup plan for that. Another issue with the evaporation plan is that the evaporators only evaporate water. They don't evaporate any of the dissolved solids that are in the water, and they will actually deposit downwind. So if we use some typical numbers on the total dissolved solids in that kind of water, it's basically going to be depositing between 90 and 360 tons of salt downwind each year. Now, for a year or 2, that's not going to make any difference. But if you do that for 20, 25 years, you're going to be affecting forest productivity downwind of the evaporation system. So in summary, I don't really think it's possible to operate a dry, deep pit mine on Trail Ridge without substantially increasing the frequency and severity of drought in that southeastern corner of the swamp. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Jackson. Next person is Mr. Bill Sapp.
Chairwoman Smith, committee members, first I want to say thank you to Dr. Jackson. He has been doing all this work on his own nickel, and he's been doing a tremendous job, so thank you for that. And thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony in support of House Bill 71. My name is Bill Sapp. I'm a senior attorney for the Southern Environmental Law Center. Before I joined SCLC in 2007, I was a JAG officer at the Army Corps of Engineers headquarters in DC. I clerked for Chief Avant Edenfield in Savannah. I was the lead wetlands attorney for Region 4 of the EPA here in Atlanta. And I also worked for Alston and Bird here in Atlanta. I'm also the chair of the Okefenokee Protection Alliance, which is a coalition of over 40 local, state, and national organizations. We collectively represent over 5 million members. And the mission of the Alliance is to protect the Okefenokee Swamp for this generation as well as future generations. The path forward for House Bill 71 is guided both by the Georgia Constitution and the will of Georgia's citizens. The Georgia Constitution established the Georgia House with its many elections and its many districts to be the government body most in tune with the wishes and desires of Georgians. The Georgia Constitution goes on to empower the General Assembly as a whole to protect, and I'm quoting here, to protect and preserve the vital natural areas of this state. Well, Georgians have made it abundantly clear that the Okefenokee is vital, and they want it protected from inappropriate land uses like mining on its very doorstep. Georgians have made this position clear in tens of thousands of written and oral comments to the Corps and EPD, in newspaper articles, op-eds, letters to the editors, interviews, and polling data. They've done it through high school camping trips and second grade school visits, through award-winning documentaries, and I suspect by calling you their legislators in record numbers. In short, Georgians from across the state have made it clear that the Okefenokee is a Georgia treasure, and they want it treasured. The Georgia Constitution also makes clear that it is the General Assembly, not executive agencies such as the EPD, that should be gauging public will, identifying vital areas of the state, and protecting them over the long term. The EPD is not designed or equipped to do any of these critical tasks. The EPD was created to evaluate applications based on laws passed by the General Assembly and where an applicant can prove that their projects will not harm the environment. It's the EPD that is supposed to wait on the General Assembly, not the other way around. Had we worked together to pass a House Bill 71 during the DuPont experience, we would all be better off now. Finally, under legal precedent from Justice Scalia on down, House Bill 71 will not lead to a taking of private property. There's no current mining within the area covered by the bill, and the bill does not impact the current mining proposal that is under consideration at this time. And landowners, and this is especially important, and landowners will continue to be able to grow timber, to farm, to develop, and to hunt on their land. As long as these economic uses are available, it is not a taking. It is also critical that we remember that all Georgians have property rights, which includes the right to enjoy our public lands unimpaired. Thank you. And I want you to know I've submitted a letter to this committee that expands on some of these points. And I also want you all to know that the Okefenokee was featured on Jeopardy in a question just last night. So if you don't have any questions, we can move on.
Thank you, Ms. Sapp.
Thank you.
Not now. We'll get to the end, huh? All right, next is Mr. Michael Lusk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. My name is Michael Lusk, and I am the refuge manager of the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge within the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I have been there 9.5 years, and I have been a certified wildlife biologist for over 30 years. The Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge was established in 1937 and currently includes more than 407,000 acres, which encompasses 93% of the Okefenokee Swamp. Therefore, the refuge is the primary owner and manager of the Okefenokee Swamp. The Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge is an important unit of the National Wildlife Refuge System, which is managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge was established to, quote, provide refuge and breeding ground for migratory birds and other wildlife. As the refuge manager, my primary role is to oversee the operations of the refuge and ensure the purposes are upheld. It is within that role in mind that I offer this testimony to you today. The refuge is an internationally recognized destination, seeing approximately 400,000 visitors annually. According to a 2022 Banking on Nature report, the Okefenokee Swamp supports 955 jobs and contributes $24 million annually to local economies, as is. The swamp has been designated as a national natural landmark by the Secretary of Interior and as a on wetlands. In addition, the refuge is also under consideration for nomination as a UNESCO World Heritage Site due to its unique and intact hydrology and ecology. The name Okefenokee is derived from an ancient Creek Muskogee word, Ogwafinaga, which means trembling waters in a low place. The ecology of the Okefenokee Swamp sustained the lives of ancient peoples who depended on it for food, shelter, and community. And centuries later, this is still the case for the people who call the Okefenokee region home. The swamp is part of the Muskogee Creek Nation ancestral homeland and is recognized as a significant and important traditional cultural property to them. The astounding thing about the Okefenokee is that the hydrology of the swamp is still essentially intact, meaning that the ecosystem that you see there today is essentially the same as it would have been when the first people beheld its dark flowing waters. The geological feature that allowed the swamp to form in the first place and allows it to still exist today is the ancient barrier island known as Trail Ridge, which supports the integrity of the Okefenokee Swamp. Trail Ridge was likely used as a travel corridor by the Muskogee Creek Nation ancestors, and burial mounds have been documented along this portion of the feature. In November 2022, Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland sent a letter to Governor Kemp expressing serious concerns regarding proposed mining activities that have the potential to negatively impact the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, the surrounding ecosystem, and cultural sites. In her letter, the Secretary strongly recommended that the state of Georgia not move ahead with approval for proposed titanium dioxide mine adjacent to the refuge. Surface mining along Trail Ridge and other areas adjacent to the refuge would damage the integrity of the Okefenokee Swamp and the important cultural values of this area. I have provided the committee with a copy of Secretary Haaland's letter to be included in the record. Thank you for allowing me to testify today about the significance of the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge. Of course, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and if any of you have not been to the refuge and would like a personal tour, I would be most happy to accommodate you at any time. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Mr. Josh Howard.
Good afternoon. My name is Josh Howard, and I'm the president of the Friends of Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge. We were founded in 1990, and we're the official Friends group of the refuge, with our core mission being supporting environmental education and interpretation out there at the refuge. So I'm a lifelong resident of Charlton County, and my family has lived there for at least 5 generations. I've worked for the Charlton County school system for the last 27 years, mostly as an administrator, and my current role is the system director of CTAE and alternative education. Through this role, I work closely with economic development, workforce development, and work-based learning. I'm also a past president of the Okefenokee Chamber of Commerce in Charlton County. I've enjoyed using the Okefenokee my entire life, and I can tell you that there is no experience quite like spending the night out in that swamp. First, I'd like to say that I'm disappointed that this bill was not allowed to move forward again this year, and I'm disappointed that my representative, Mr. John Corbett, who I've supported in every election he's been in, is not a co-sponsor of this bill. I'm also bewildered that we are having to fight so hard to get something as unique and wonderful as the Okefenokee Swamp protected. The respected scientists that have warned of the dangers of mining on Trail Ridge concerns me, as it does many others, but I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to present a voice of Charlton County residents that some of you may have not heard. This may come as a surprise, but there are many folks in Charlton County residents that oppose mining on Trail Ridge. The resolution of support for current mining proposals from the Charlton County Board of Commissioners does not represent the views of many of the residents of our county. Only a few that stand to benefit personally and financially from the mine strongly support it. Those voices do not speak for the rest of us. The promises of economic growth and jobs for Charlton County residents are hollow at best. The mine is much closer to Florida than it is to the largest population concentration in Charlton County. We believe that most people that work there will be from out of town. We've seen this before with our state and then private federal prison. And not only will there be no Charlton County folks working there, we also will not see a substantial sales tax benefit because the nearest town of any substance is St. George, and there are not a lot of places for employees to spend money. Charlton County doesn't have a workforce to staff a mine. The unemployment report from November of 2022 shows Charlton County has a 2.9% unemployment rate, which is actually less than the 3% that the state had at the same period. The 2021 Charlton County, Georgia area labor profile compiled by the Georgia Department of Labor reported that Charlton County has a workforce of 4,959 people and only 157 are unemployed. Those people could land a job if they wanted because most businesses now are short-staffed and they're hiring. The largest employers outside of our school system are manufacturing firms that have to provide free shuttles to employees from Waycross and Camden County just to keep their doors open. We believe that enhanced ecotourism is a much better and sustainable economic driver for Charlton County and other swamp counties, and hundreds of jobs will be impacted if the swamp is compromised. The Okefenokee is the greatest asset and resource in Charlton County, and no mining company can guarantee that their mines will not cause irreparable harm. If mining activities cause the problems that we believe they will, then it cannot be undone. For many of us, the Okefenokee is part of our identity. We may have different temperaments, talents, and convictions, but we are all swampers and identify with it. We don't want to risk it. We implore you to reconsider this bill and get it passed as soon as possible to protect the Okefenokee for now and for future generations of Georgians and Americans. The risk of mining activities on Trail Ridge for this common mineral are just too great. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Appreciate it. Next is Reverend Nixon.
Thank you all for having me here. My name is Antoine Nixon, but who I am is of little significance to you all. What I am and what I stand for probably should be. I'm here to, I will quote Maya Angelou here. She says, "I come as one, but I stand as 10,000. So one of those 10,000 people is one Miss Deborah Reed, who was a person of color who grew up in the rural South, who was not allowed to go to places that my Caucasian counterparts could go. And one thing she spoke about in this conversations and focusing with Senator Ossoff there and also Secretary of Interior Holland was that growing up there, they had no place to go as a person of color, and they could only go to the swamp. I don't know if many of you all know what it's like to have that on your conscience, but as a child who earlier segregated, one of the 3 people who segregated Camden County could only go to the swamp as a place of refuge. That's a hard thing, and I'm sure it would do something to her soul if this place came into any type of harm, and we should consider that. But also, I stand as a pastor before you all and as a steward over this country and over this land that God has given us. And in the Bible, it says that in the beginning, God created this earth, and he separated a place called Eden and put it eastward. And while separating that place, he put Adam in the end of it. And when he put Adam there, he gave him 2 responsibilities, which was to dress it and to keep it. All of us who are here today stand as an Adam. We're all here to dress, to keep, to provide, and to protect this secret place, this sacred place, this special place that we know of that's no different than Eden, that was separated from the rest of creation. And the Okefenokee is just like that. It is separated from all of creation, and if we don't take care of it, it's not going to matter about any of the decisions that we make, because if we don't have a land, then we don't need a people. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. Appreciate your comments. Mr. Cliff Oxford.
Thank you for having me. I'm Cliff Oxford. I was born on Route 3, Swamp Road. And fortunately, those survival swamp instincts carried over. I came up here, went to school, then with myself and 7 or 8 technology rebels started a technology company. And we grew that to several thousand. And because you made Georgia a great state to do business in, was one of the reasons we were able to compete against technology companies in California. But after STI and selling that company, I went to Emory, where my alma mater, endowed the Emory Entrepreneur MBA program. After that, I wrote a daily column for Forbes, and I also wrote for the New York Times, hoping that covers all the political spectrum in both of those magazines. Today, I run the Porsche Clifco think tank, which we have the 100 top entrepreneurs across America. And I invite the committee April 18th to come to one of our meetings at Porsche. But what I'm most excited about, as I've gone through my career, I'm going back home and I just got 250 acres of pine trees about 3 miles from Trail Ridge, the way the crow flies. And I'm going to be a small-time tree farmer. And I used to tell people I was going to be a small-time technology company. But I want to go back and commit to this region. And I want to talk to you about entrepreneurship, the environment, and economic development, because I think the 3 go together. They always have gone together. Entrepreneurs have always been the biggest environmentalist. And I saw the CEO of Twin Pines in Charlton County when I went there, and I told Mr. Mills, I said, look, I'm all for economic development. If you will come and convince through science these people like Mr. Jackson from University of Georgia, you come and convince him through science that you will not harm that swamp. You won't hit that aquifer. And people, I've been through the swamp in summers when it gets dry. It comes from this Majesty to Siberia when it goes dry. And you pray for rain. But I asked Mr. Mills, I said, come and let's have a peer-to-peer group. When I used to go against IBM as a small technology company, I wanted to go before committees and prove what we were doing was going to make lives better and make technology better. And to this day, Mr. Mills has not taken my advice. I give out a lot of business advice these days, and this is one that certainly was not taken. And I'll ask the committee, if you had 12 plumbers come to your house, like Mr. Jackson, and say, you shouldn't do this because you could dry up all of your land. You shouldn't put this water system in, because it'll dry up all of your land. And you had one manufacturing rep next to him saying, yes, you should. Don't worry about it. We got it handled. The plumber's trying to look after you. And the manufacturing reps, like I used to be in technology, we're trying to make money. So I would ask you to please consider this. And I'll end by saying in 2018, because I still got a lot of swamp in me, 2018, I took 35 CEOs from the Swamp to Sea tour, CEOs all over the country. And they came and said, where in the world has Georgia been with this Okefenokee? When they saw Cumberland Island, saw the St. Mary's River, saw the swamp. These are CEOs of major companies. So what I would like to do is come back to this committee and let's talk about how we can get 3,500 CEOs to come down to the swamp, because the resource is there, and it would be a tremendous mistake to take this kind of risk. I'm a risk taker. I've taken some of the craziest risk in the world. To put a hole down in the swamp would be unprecedented, and I think Georgia would have a scar not only in the swamp, but it would be a scar for this state forever. So I so kindly ask all of you to consider HB 71. And I thank Ms. Darlene for bringing this, because I plan to go back and be your neighbor very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it, Mr. Oxford. Miss Emily Floor.
Thank you for the opportunity to represent the St. Mary's River at the Georgia Capitol today. My name is Emily Floor. I'm the Executive Director for St. Mary's Riverkeeper, an independent environmental advocacy group charged with being a trusted voice for and a protector of the St. Mary's River, its watershed, and the tributaries in the 4 counties it serves: Camden and Charlton County in Georgia, Baker and Nassau County in Florida. Arising from the Okefenokee Swamp, the St. Mary's River forms the border between southeast Georgia and northeast Florida, flowing 130 miles to the Atlantic Ocean, where it empties at Cumberland Island National Seashore. To get there, the river flows along the southwestern, southern, and eastern margins of Trail Ridge before heading east. A river is only as healthy as its headwaters and tributaries, and the St. Mary's River is bookended by 2 national treasures, the Okefenokee Swamp and Cumberland Island National Seashore. It is imperative we maintain the health of the entire ecosystem connected to the river. St. Mary's Riverkeeper is concerned the proposed mine, as presented to Georgia EPD, will negatively impact the St. Mary's River watershed. The significant risk of failure and use of several experimental and untested techniques for sand mining is concerning due to the catastrophic events that could happen should something go wrong. The St. Mary's River and its headwaters, the Okefenokee Swamp, are pristine waterways and loved by all locals and those who come to experience its scenic wilderness. House Bill 71 would protect much of Trail Ridge from future mining operations to ensure the continued existence of the Okefenokee Swamp and the ecosystem connected to it. However, what the bill does not mention is that it also protects the St. Mary's River in its entirety from swamp to sea. One bill can preserve 2 beloved Georgia waterways. I invite every member of this committee to come and experience the beauty of the St. Mary's River. Much like the swamp, the St. Mary's River provides an opportunity to escape from the hustle and bustle of the world. With very little development along the waterfront, you can go for miles without seeing a single home. With blue skies, green trees, white sandy shorelines, and the darkest black water, you cannot help but be in awe of the spectacular place. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Floor. Appreciate it. Mr. Worley.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair. It's great to see all of you distinguished members. My name is Mike Worley, and I'm President and CEO of Georgia Wildlife Federation, one of our state's oldest and largest conservation organizations. We were founded in 1936 in the Lanier Hotel in Macon, Georgia, by hunting and fishing clubs from across the state. Today, we've roughly 30,000 members, and we represent a broad spectrum of Georgians, while still remaining true to our hunting and fishing roots. We've been partners with our state's wildlife agency since our founding and since their founding. To sum up who we are in one sentence, GWF advocates for the professional science-based management of our wildlife and natural resources, or as we like to say, we are keeping Georgia wild. I'm here today to speak on behalf of protecting the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge for today and tomorrow, for those of us here and now and generations to come, both from within Georgia and around the world. Founded in 1937 as a refuge and breeding ground for migratory birds and other wildlife, the Wildlife Refuge provides habitat for threatened and endangered species such as the red cockaded woodpecker, wood storks, indigo snakes, and a wide variety of other wildlife species. It is world-renowned for its amphibian population that are bioindicators of global health. More than 600 plant species have been identified on refuge lands. I have been thrilled to the sounds of sandhill cranes, Grus canadensis protensis, while overnighting in the swamp. Some other species that are of special concern on the refuge include the gopher tortoise, Sherman's fox squirrels, that's Scurius niger, round-tailed muskrats, Neophyber alene extoraceus, Bachman's sparrow, I'm going to skip that one, neotropical migratory birds, black-banded sunfish, yep, that one too, Chaetodon, mud sunfish, and banded top minnows, Fundulus cingulatus. The most important species in the swamp, and the most important species for the future of the swamp, is Homo sapiens. We are the only species capable of mourning the loss of another species. We are the only species on this earth capable of preserving or destroying another species. We are the only species on this earth capable of preserving or destroying the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge and the amazing plants, animals, and magic that are the swamp. In my experience working around the Capitol since the late 1980s, I've never seen a bill with 91 co-sponsors. With this level of bipartisan support, and with this level of support around the state, I encourage you to support passage of House Bill 71, the Okefenokee Protection Act. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Worley. Ms. Rena Peck.
Thank you. Thank you, committee. I'm Rena Ann Peck. I'm an ecologist, and I'm the executive director of Georgia River Network. We are DNR's nonprofit conservation partner managing the state's water trails program. So my dog in the fight is the Okefenokee National Wilderness Canoe Trail, which is threatened by swamp dewatering in that area, as Dr. Rhett Jackson told you. In your folder, you have letters from Newt Gingrich in support of House Bill 71. You have letters from the Muskogee Creek tribe in Oklahoma that's declared Trail Ridge a sacred site. There are letters from folks that have come up to you today, and I hope that everyone can be heard. The Nature Conservancy's letter is in there as well, and I know GMA is for the bill. Tourism has been a big driver. It's our number 2 economic driver in the state at $64.5 billion. Rural economic development around our water trails has been a lifesaver for some communities. And as you heard, there are 955 jobs associated with the Okefenokee Wilderness Canoe Trail. You can't see the swamp unless you're on that canoe trail. So if you dry up portions of it, then you cannot access it for tourism, for fishing, for hunting, for education. Also, it was mentioned that the Okefenokee is up for bid as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. That will be a game changer for the Southeast. So, as the head of the Georgia Water Trails Program in defense of the Okefenokee Wilderness Canoe Trail, I hope that you will protect our natural resource, the Okefenokee Swamp, headwaters to the St. Mary's and Suwannee Rivers, and protect the sustainable economy for southeastern Georgia. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. We've got 13 minutes left for this side. Okay, Miss Alice Keys.
Thank you so much, Chairman. Thank you, committee. My name is Alice Keyes, and I am here representing 100 Miles, and as a resident of Brunswick, Georgia. We are also a member organization of the Okefenokee Protection Alliance. A pleasure to be with you today. Protecting the Okefenokee is a high priority for members of our organization and Georgians all over the state. A poll conducted last year found that 60% of Georgians oppose mining next to the swamp. 68% of Georgians and 71% of South Georgians who were polled support state legislation to permanently protect the Okefenokee Swamp. That poll is provided in the packet before you. 100 Miles has the privilege of working in communities throughout the Southeast, including residents like Mr. Howard and Reverend Nixon. And I'm happy to see that Chairman Cruz and Commissioner Jones are here from Charlton County. And we've worked with a lot of community and elected officials throughout communities around the swamp. Many of them are not able to be here today. So in their stead, I've provided for you copies of resolutions that have been passed by city councils and county commissions throughout the southeastern part of Georgia. City of Homeland in Charlton County, Waycross and Ware County, Valdosta, Kingsland, St. Mary's, and Brunswick. 2 of the resolutions explicitly support the passage of House Bill 71, and the others simply ask the General Assembly to protect the Okefenokee Swamp. Over 144,000 individuals are represented by these resolutions passed in these communities. A similar situation came before the Georgia General Assembly in the late 1960s, when mining companies requested license to mine the seabed and the marshes around Tybee Island, Ossabaw Island, Wausau, and St. Catharines, thousands of acres. But state officials led by Representative Lead Harris, whose district was just south of the area that was threatened, understood that this beloved landscape, once it was compromised, would never be the same again. So, with abundant support from the residents and the state of Georgia residents, the Georgia Coastal Marshlands Protection Act was passed in 1970. So please, act on your authority, respond to your constituents, and pass House Bill 71, the Okefenokee Protection Act. Thank you so much for your time.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Mr. Josh Marks.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Josh Marks, and I'm president of Georgians for the Okefenokee, a statewide organization dedicated to the swamp's protection. I have worked in the field of environmental law and policy for over 30 years, including advocacy for the Okefenokee on and off for 26 of those years. I want to talk about history and how if we don't learn from it, we are destined to repeat it. One of the most famous sayings. Back in the 1990s, I was part of the team that successfully persuaded DuPont to abandon its proposal to mine 39,000 acres on Trail Ridge along the entirety of the refuge's eastern boundary. Like today, there was a widespread public uproar about that proposal. Citizens around the world were joined by the Interior Secretary and Senator Max Cleland, along with Governors Miller and Barnes, and the DNR board, all of whom opposed what was universally acknowledged as an existential threat to the swamp. DuPont ended up donating 16,000 acres of land that it owned for conservation, of which almost 7,000 acres were then donated to the refuge for permanent protection. I was the lawyer who handled that donation, receiving it from DuPont and then donating it to the refuge. All of us who worked on the project back then collectively breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that we had protected the Okefenokee forever. No one imagined that another company would try this again, so no one thought to ask the legislature to step in. In hindsight, that was a huge misjudgment. Not only are we facing another mining project threatening the swamp, but unfortunately, it's by a company and executives with no history, and I repeat, no history of developing titanium mines. But they do have a well-documented track record of misrepresentations and violations in the development of this project so far and other projects. So why is it that a company with no experience with titanium mining, but a very troubling track record, would try to do something that DuPont, at the time the world's biggest chemical company, decided not to do. The leading domestic operator in the titanium mining industry is a company called Chemours, which is actually the successor to DuPont. They are the largest miner in North America for titanium, and they have mines in southeast Georgia and northeast Florida. And they have over 70 years of experience with titanium mining. They would have been the logical company to try and come to the swamp and mine on Trail Ridge along the refuge. But last year, following pressure from some of the same shareholders that pressured DuPont back in the late 1990s, Chemours said the following, and I quote, and this comes from a statement that Chemours released on January 27th of 2022. Chemours has no plans to open new mining locations on Trail Ridge next to the Okefenokee. We believe we can optimize our existing mining locations in Georgia and Florida to sustain operations well into the 2030s. In other words, if Chemours, the most qualified titanium mining company in North America, publicly committed to avoid the swamp, that tells us that it doesn't think that mining can be done safely next to the swamp, and that it is too big a risk to take to try to do that next to the swamp. This also makes sense because at its nearby Mission Mine in northeast Charlton County, which is a much smaller project than that which is proposed by Twin Pines, Chemours tried and failed. They tried and failed to evaporate all of its wastewater, which is what Twin Pines is proposing. And again, the Chemours project is 14 times smaller than what Twin Pines is proposing. So again, Chemours tried and failed to do a project that was 14 times smaller what Twin Pines is proposing to do next to the swamp. But not only is mining next to the swamp not worth the risk, as Dr. Jackson told you very eloquently, the titanium that Twin Pines and other mining companies seek at Trail Ridge is simply not needed. Titanium is a very common mineral found throughout the southeastern U.S. And contrary to the mining industry's claims, the titanium at the swamp is pigment grade, used as a whitener for paint, paper, plastics, and food products. It is not metallic grade. This will not go into F-35 warplanes or the space shuttle. Thus, arguments that it is necessary for our national security are simply false. So if the titanium on Trail Ridge isn't needed, that's even more reason why no one should be allowed to put the swamp at risk, and why HB 71 is reasonable, necessary, and sensible. So in conclusion, I urge you, the subcommittee and the full committee, to listen to all 91 members of the House who have already signed on to the bill, which, as Mike Worley said, is unprecedented. I've been working in environmental advocacy around the United States for over 30 years. I've never, ever seen a bill with such overwhelming bipartisan, geographic, and statewide support as this bill, HB 71. And that's a testament to Chairman Taylor and Chairman Stevens and the other 89 signatories on the bill. I don't want us to have to be back here in 5, 10, or 25 years having this same argument. I would hope that we would learn from history and we would redress the mistake that we made, and that we would protect Georgia's greatest natural resource. And in so doing, you will be honoring the name of this committee, the Natural Resources Committee, and leaving an incredible legacy for our kids and grandkids. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes, sir. We have a little less than 3 minutes left. So we're going to go down this other list. We've got Dr. Paul Bolster. Is that correct? Correct me if I'm wrong now, Doctor.
That's correct. You've heard some wonderfully powerful testimony. Mine is not nearly as dramatic as what you've heard already. I sort of am shamelessly here to promote my book on the coastal Georgia, on the Coastal Protection Act, which came out from the University of Georgia about 3 years ago. A lot of these stories can be verified in the historical research that I've done. I also am trying to show that your investment in the University of Georgia and the PhD in history program was valuable. So this is part of the return on investment that you made in my education there. And so for that purpose, I'd like to read to you from, no, I won't do that. I won't do that to you. The parallels to what happened in 1970 are just remarkable. You've already achieved one of the things they did in 1970 and made this issue bipartisan. The bill passed in 1970 to protect the coast with actually a higher percentage of Republicans voting for it than Democrats. So it was an important thing that back then, environmental policy, protecting the critical needs of the state of Georgia, critical places, was a bipartisan issue. The other thing is that one of the things that was interesting is the House had lots of debate back and forth. It took a long time, and the bill passed just by a small margin, actually, in the House. Now, you'll be interested to know that the Senate, they always follow one leader. It passed the bill unanimously. So I commend the House in its vigorous effort to, look at every possible position and mull over the bill. Nobody leads the House. You all individually decide what happens. So there are some simple little sort of lessons, I think, from 1970, and that's what I want to give you is some history here of Georgia's tremendous effort to preserve the coast and to preserve its natural resources. First of all, in the process that they had public hearings. There were 9 public hearings in those 2 years to listen to the public. One in Savannah lasted for 2 days. Everybody got a chance to talk who wanted to talk. So public hearings are the way that legislators get to understand what the experts have to say, what the general public has to say. In that Savannah hearing, I think all told are 200 people that talked, and only one was for the mine. First of all, the other thing is study committees. I think you have in the breast of this committee a study committee. They had one in the House and one in the Senate. They worked vigorously to try to understand what Georgia should do. They listened carefully to the scientists, and Lester Maddox had the first environmental impact study in the United States probably done over that issue. So taking the views very seriously of all the scientists that you've heard today and others, that's critical. That's what they did back then. I hope you follow that practice of listening to the scientists. The choice that Georgia had was industrialize the coast by mining it or use it for tourism. And they made this decision that we were better off as a state economically and developmentally and for jobs to use it for tourism. And that has proven itself over and over again that the benefit of environmental preservation is tremendous for tourism.
I may have to get you to kind of wrap it up, Doc.
Let me close by saying, listen to the voters. And the voters across the state want to preserve the Okefenokee. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Appreciate it. Okay, at this time, we're going to start now. Ms. Darlene, you want to take 30 seconds? And yes, ma'am.
Is it on? Okay. I am very, very grateful for the attention that you have given to this issue today. I'm very grateful. My goal today was to have you hear from a very diverse experts, and they know and understand the intricacies of the Okefenokee area. I think that has been done. And now you can match what you've heard today with the many, many contacts that you have had from across the state, some of them your own constituents, some from other places, and from the handouts that you've got. You can see what's in that folder, and you've heard and can match them. The speakers today and those many commenters that you've had, I want to thank you. And I very much look forward to a very positive future outcome for the Okefenokee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Taylor. Appreciate it. All right, we're going to take just a minute and transition over. We'll start with Mr. Joe Hopkins.
Thank you, members of the committee. I don't have an army of folks behind me, so I don't have thousands of polls that I got to write up my questions and get poll answers for or anything else. I'm a private landowner. I'm glad the gentleman that brought up the DuPont thing, because you see this here, I happened to be around in the 90s also. Actually, it was some of our property that was involved in that controversy. And we had something very similar to this. We were flooded with groups that were in opposition to the mine. They came in, they were going to save us. They were going to build a research center, which we ultimately did. They also, when DuPont agreed to, as part of the collaborative agreement that we all signed, that when DuPont agreed not to do it, the county was going to get $5 million in lost revenue that they would have brought in from the mine and digest, they would have gone. Our company, my family company, we were going to get paid for the deposits. The research center got built. That part of the plan came through. Everybody left, and here we are, to do the math, 20-something, 30 years later. Same group of, same organizations, just different faces. But we're back, and we're again talking about another research center. What happened to the research center? Folks like you gave $2.2 million to Charlton County and renovated an old school building. And DuPont put up $50,000 to operate this system. And they fixed it. It was really nice. It was pretty. They had some murals, had a lot of exhibits and all. And at the end of about a year, the operating money ran out. And I can't remember which NGO it was now that was running it, said, well, we're not going to do it unless somebody pays us. And they shut the doors. However, today it houses our tax commissioner's office, our tax collector's office, our county commission office, and a very nice auditorium. So it didn't all go to waste. It just didn't make it as a research center. And I'll bring that up is I hear a lot of promises. I grew up there. I guided in the swamp when I was in high school. I've spent my entire life there except when I was off to college. And I don't want to see the swamp harmed any more than anyone else. Secondly, let me point out I'm not here on behalf of Twin Pines. I'm here on behalf of Toledo Manufacturing Company, which owns land adjacent to the swamp along Trail Ridge. And yeah, I've read Dr. Jackson's, I think the last was a 5-page report, if I'm correct on that. And I read it, and I found one thing interesting is I assume that they know about mobile mining. Titanium can be done with mobile mining. Interesting thing about mobile mining is it recirculates and reuses 98% of the water. So it recycles the water, so you don't have evaporation problems and you don't have waters going in, high humate waters going into the creeks and things like that. So if this bill passes, then we won't even consider that, obviously, because who's going to come spend millions of dollars of research to see what titanium is there, what levels, what depths, what concentrations, and when they've already got a law passed that says you can't get a permit regardless. So it will put an end to it. But I am president of Toledo Manufacturing Company. It's a family-owned company. We've only been around for 111 years. We own land adjacent to the Okefenokee Swamp, and it contains a significant volume of titanium and zirconium, which are included in the Interior Department's, quote, list of critical minerals as they are vital to our nation's security and economic prosperity. The deposit also contains rare earth minerals, and you've probably heard a lot about rare earth minerals as we talk about electronics and things like that. I happen to disagree a little bit about whether it's a taking of a private property right or not. I know what a lot of folks say, but the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution does provide that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. That's what your EPD does. That's what it does. It provides that due process of law that says, here, make your case. If you want a permit, we'll look at it. You may lose, but you have had your due process of law. If we pass this bill, that goes away. The Georgia Department of Environmental Protection provides due process when an application is filed requiring a surface mining permit. All persons interested with regard to any issue or questions regarding that permit have the opportunity to present evidence and concerns with the EPD. And we have heard how much that has gone on in the last year or two. Who also has independent experts employed to review and determine whether to grant or deny permit, as well as all the conditions that must be complied with by the permittee. This proposed legislation violates and destroys that due process and turns the permitting process into a political process. Let me just ask you to think about this. What if I came to you and said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to have some legislation passed, and this is what I want it to do. I want it to require the EPD to give me a mining permit. I don't want to go through any kind of process now. I just want you to require them to. You'd think that was the most ludicrous thing that I ever came to you and asked you to do. That's exactly what they're doing in the reverse. They're saying, deny this permit. We don't want to see what the EPD, we don't want to see what independent experts, and I use that word cautiously because it's very difficult to find an independent expert anymore. Everybody has an opinion, everybody has a bias. But at least I hope that the EPD has some folks that are independent. I don't think we really want to get the process of permitting and all to become a legislative issue so that you get to deal with all types of issues. This may just be the surface, and we will have opened Pandora's box, and I'm afraid you may have trouble closing it after that. But another thing I'm really interested in is why in southeast Georgia and northeast Florida for 70 years, the past 70 years, we've been mining titanium minerals on Trail Ridge, adjacent to Trail Ridge, just off of Trail Ridge, within 2 miles of the St. Mary's River, within 2 miles of the Satilla River. That's going on right now, within 2 miles of the Satilla River. There was a Southern Onyx mine that's now owned by Chemours. Go down there and talk to the people that work there that have those jobs. They're good jobs. The starting pay is $22 an hour with benefits. That may not sound like much up here in Atlanta, but in a poor county like I live in, that's a good starting pay right out of high school with only a high school education. And we've got a laboratory. We've got a living laboratory of what's happened with surface mining done on these various formations. So it would not be very difficult to go down and say, let's if we need to, let's take a year or two and let's do some research. Let's put some test wells in. Let's see what kind of problems we have with water tables here, on the ridge, off the ridge, and let's see if we have a problem. I don't know if any of you watched the TPC this last weekend at Sawgrass, but that's on reclaimed mine land, Sawgrass. We have a federal prison built on top of reclaimed mine land right north of Folkston, right where I live. And we have a residential community. And the lakes that were left when Humphreys finished mining for DuPont back in the 60s, 70s, whenever it was, the lakes that are left, that's where the most valuable residential lots are, around those lakes. It doesn't leave a ghost town. And if you've ever been to Regency Square in Jacksonville, which used to be a real active mall, but it's been replaced by more modern ones, reclaimed mine. Well, actually, it wasn't reclaimed very well, but mined land down there. So all I ask y'all to do is, I think we just need to slow down. I understand everybody upset. If I knew for a fact, or I felt like it was going to, maybe the proposal they have is not what you need, but would a mobile mine work? If you pass this, we'll never know that. We'll never know. And our rights will be taken, I can assure you, without any money. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll be glad to answer questions if you have any.
Okay, we'll go down and see if we got some time left. Thanks, Mr. Hopkins. Mr. Drew Jones.
Wow, that was powerful testimony. I hate to go after that, but my name is Drew Jones. I'm a 38-year-old pharmacist and forest land manager. I also work for Toledo Manufacturing. Lived in Charlton County my whole life. I'm married and 2 beautiful daughters. We live about 3 miles from the Okefenokee Swamp. We drink well water. Kids go to public school. I care deeply about the Okefenokee Swamp and my community. All 4 sides of my family have been in Charlton County for over 100 years, some since 1830. Back before the legislature even made Charlton County a county. My great-great-great-grandfather was the first mayor of Folkestone, Georgia. I'm very proud of that. I'm currently serving my third term as county commissioner and my first on Development Authority. I was appointed once by Superior Court, reelected twice as county commissioner in District 4. I pick up trash weekly on the roadsides. I participate in local events, and I love my community as much as these people love the swamp, and I respect their opinion. I have a vested interest in my community. If anybody cares, I absolutely do. My heart's beating because I care about my community right now, not because I'm nervous. My constituent needs matter a whole lot to me, and the needs here in Atlanta are probably, in certain communities, a lot like ours, but our constituents ask for, improved sidewalks. We have more county graded dirt roads than any county in the whole state, so the majority of our roads are unpaved and graded. They want longer library hours, more senior center services, better roads. Of our county's total $13 million budget, I know that's tiny to you all, $3 million of that 13 comes from a landfill, $600,000 comes from a prison. The rest is derived from Chemours Mine and other small businesses. So as a percent of our total budget, the largest businesses really matter a lot. In lieu of property taxes, the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge pays $200,000 in lieu of property taxes. But that's, and we're grateful for it, but that's a tiny percent of our total budget. Our hospital, our only hospital in the county, closed approximately a decade ago and has almost $2 million in IRS liens on it. So as far as access to health care and, emergency care in our county, we have none. We have a $2 million IRS lien on it. Our constituents say, why don't we have a hospital? Why don't y'all get that back going? There's IRS lien on it. So these are real world issues that we deal with daily. Every child in our school system gets free lunch, every single child, as a result of our poverty levels in the county. Our county greatly needs large quantities of high-paying jobs in this strategic area. We talked about labor participation rate, Mr. Josh Howard did. A lot of people don't have a ride to work. So a lot of these people, they're busing here from other places. Yes, that is true. But labor participation is low. A lot of these people don't have rides. There's a lot of people that graduate from high school that just aren't cut out for college and need an opportunity to make Chemours is close to $50,000 a year, more than school teacher pay with no college education, with 401k benefits, the whole 9 yards. Multiple sectors and businesses benefit from these mines. If you go in Jessup or downtown Folkestone and you go in the restaurants, gas stations, any of the businesses, you're going to see Chemours uniforms. They're yellow. You can't miss them. Go in Walmart and Jessup on the weekend. I guarantee you'll see 5. You talk to Yancey, the largest Caterpillar dealer in our area, and ask them who their largest customer is probably south of Atlanta. Guarantee you it's Chemours at these mines. Again, I'm not advocating for Twin Pines or Chemours. I'm just saying there's synergies, there's jobs, there's opportunities in a strategic area. There's a lot of trades taught on site that can be used as a building block. So some people say, well, the mine will be here for 10 years, 12 years. They can become an electrician. They can become a geologists, chemists. They're hiring, high-paying truck drivers, chemists, electricians, biologists, architects, engineers, surveyors. Go on their website. There are a lot of opportunities too, and I talked to Mr. Josh Howard. Again, this is a collaborative process. I've talked to all sides this whole time. Talked to Mr. Josh Howard about the high school offering trade programs where kids could get out of school and learn these trades, go into work at Chemours and make more than a school teacher. And that's a whole other issue, school teacher pay, that probably should be addressed. In the 60s and 70s, Humphreys Mining Company brought great jobs, synergies, successfully reclaimed the land. Like Mr. Joe Hopkins said, there's houses and wells there today. Most people sitting in this room don't even know there was a mine in the 60s and 70s. D. Ray James Federal Prison in Charlton was on reclaimed land. There's hundreds of houses, thousands of people living, with water wells, septic tanks, mostly mobile homes, and houses around the lake on reclaimed land. Back then, it was a voluntary process where the company just learned to reclaim it themselves. Now it's part of your permitting process. You're required to reclaim topsoil. I personally own land with my brother that was mined by Southern Onyx, now Chemours, on the North Mine in Charlton County. So I've been a part of the reclamation process the whole time. And let me, in 10 seconds, explain how this thing happens. They do an environmental once the permit's done, they do an environmental assessment. Chemours got the University of Georgia Gopher Turtle team to move the gopher turtles to a state park. They located everyone. They harvest the timber sustainably. They remove the topsoil. They leave it windrowed. They dig the dirt up, mix it with water, use inertia to separate it, put the dirt back, let it dry, put topsoil back, plant trees for the very next growing season. So there's even a lot of thought that, you know, there's a lot of times you wouldn't even miss a growing season in a normal pine plantation. You normally cut trees, you plant them the next winter. There's a lot of instances where this, you know, continuous reclamation process would be ongoing to be very similar to industrial forest land practices. Again, save the topsoil, do it right. I don't want anything to happen in the swamp. I care about it just as much as these people. But Chemours has been in Charlton County since 2014, 2 to 3 miles depending on where they are at the certain time from the Satilla River. They sustain 60 to 80 jobs. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has 18 total positions, 6 of which are vacant, 12 are occupied. Of the 12 occupied, only 5 are local. There's 7 contract employees, 3 of which are local. So they basically got 8 local people right now, 18 total jobs. Again, Chemours, 60 to 80. Been here since 2014. They're going to be here for another couple years, be in Brantley County for another 10. There's a lot of opportunity there. Insurance, retirement, improvement, quality of life. Whenever the county had these, you know, Twin Pines had these hearings, it was in the county office, so many Chemours employees came and said, Drew, my family did not have health insurance until I went to work for Chemours. You know, made a little bit too much to be on welfare. I have dental insurance for my daughter. I am so thankful. So it's easy to say save the swamp, and I'm all for that. But these are real life issues like hospitals, roads, sidewalks, access to health care, you know, rare earth minerals that, you know, the legislature has encouraged domestic production of the things that go in these batteries and electric cars. Today, most of the rare earth minerals, mostly monazite, is produced offshore in India, Malaysia, Vietnam, and Brazil. Again, offshore. What kind of labor practices do you think are going over there? So here we have an opportunity to locally produce using fair and safe labor. You got MSHA, which is more stringent than OSHA. You got workman's comp. You got more stringent governance, more logistically efficient. You got smaller carbon footprint. You don't have to transport it here to produce titanium, zirconium, monazite, all of which have been designated as critical minerals by the U.S. Geological Survey. And again, there are different varieties of titanium, all of which can be, or some can be converted to the metal form. But you still got zirconium used for investment casting, and you got the monazite. So again, strategic to our national security and economy. Mining in Georgia has contributed to the economic prosperity for over 200 years. In our community specifically, since the 60s and 70s, all of the generation that's of that age said it brought great jobs, engineers, architects. A lot of those people are still in our community today. A lot of the roads were paved as a result of our digest growing. And again, another thing that's recently been taken out of context is people say that these minerals are not rare. They are not rare, but they're rare to occur in natural formations that are concentrated enough to be extracted. It has to be 1 or 2% for it to be economically feasible enough to extract. So it is diffusely in a lot of places, but it's not in high enough concentrations to mine. So people will take that out of context, but it is rare for these natural occurrences to be this concentrated. So in closing, I just want to say I think this bill is a gross infringement on private property rights without merit, and permits should continue to be issued on a case-by-case basis by the EPD in an objective manner, not subjective and reflexive opposition, subject to politics and emotion. I want to thank you all for your time, and I thank you all for caring about the Okefenokee Swamp. I care about it as much or more than any of you. I just feel like both can coexist. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Appreciate your comments. Marion Davis.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'm Marion Davis. I represent the Folkestone City Council and Mayor, and we want to speak in favor of private property rights. Back when the swamp, the refuge itself, was first being formed in 1937, the promise that was made to the people then that whose land was taken for the refuge was that the amount of land taken would be greater than the swamp itself, so that a buffer would be contained within the refuge, so that the refuge would not affect private property owners in their use of their property. Now, this bill does exactly the opposite of that. It takes their land, so to speak. It takes their rights to use their land. Now, I've heard some very strong arguments here today in support of this bill that were greatly misleading and a great example of subterfuge when you say 98% of those surveyed said they wanted this. 98% of what? 3, 4, 10 people? I don't know how many people they surveyed. It's just an exasperating exercise that I've witnessed here today. You need to support the people's right to use their property in the future. And each case needs to be looked at, as Mr. Jones and Mr. Hopkins spoke about, other than just totally denying it for the future. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Davis. Jesse Cruz.
I'm Jesse Cruz. I live in St. George, Georgia. It's Charlton County, the lowest part of the state you can go. Dips into Florida. I got my wife Joan here with me today, and I talked to her on the way up here. What am I going to say? I had it planned out what I was going to say. I'm changing that. I'm changing what I wanted to say. I'm a retired school teacher and coach, 47 years worth. I've done a lot of homework. The lady mentioned homework a while ago. I've done a lot of homework myself and done a lot of homework helping kids and teachers helping me. Homework. When you do homework, you observe and you ask questions and you do. I've observed all of y'all sitting here today. I am a Charlton County Commissioner for 26 years. I am the chairman. I'm not speaking on behalf of our board today. We passed a resolution that told Twin Pines, seek your permits from EPD. If you can get them, fine. If you can't get them, we'll see you. That's it. See, that's it. That was it, all we did. So I'm not speaking on behalf of my board. I'm speaking on behalf of Jesse Cruz, Charlton County citizen and St. George resident. Now, 26 years I've been on the commission board. I'm chairman today. 26 years I served and still do with the Georgia High School Executive Committee. Governor Dill appointed me to a 5-year term on the State Board of Physical Therapy, and I really thought I knew what physical therapy was all about and found out I knew nothing. I finally said, I'm just a consumer member. I said, what am I doing here? You're making sure we don't mess up, because everybody else was a physical therapist. I've observed all of y'all today. Okay, I observe people, and are you listening? Are you paying attention? I think all of you are. So have you really paid attention to what's been said here today? Nobody wants to see the swamp damaged. I've been in Charlton County all my life. All my life. I'm 69 years old today. I've been in St. George since 1975. My wife and I were married in 73. Her family owned a store there, and I married her. We moved there, and I've lived ever since. Her family had a lot of property. I've been involved in obtaining that property since I was married to her. I've got other property in the county. And the bottom line is, if you go to, how many of y'all have been to St. George? 2 people, 3 people? How many? Okay, good. Okay, a few of you. If you go through St. George and blink your eyes, you've heard them say, you're going to miss it, okay? You will miss it. It's very, very small. We have a couple of restaurants. We have the store. We have an elementary through 6th grade school, K through 6. And we're proud of that community, and we're proud of the people that live there. And the bottom line is, if Twin Pines is granted their permits, and like I said, if they get them, fine. If they don't get them, they didn't get them. EPD's in charge of that. So if they get them, then that would help our economy, because, as this already been said here, we don't have very many industries in Charlton County at all, 0, okay? And most of the people that live in St. George work in McClenny, Florida, Jacksonville, Florida, and we haven't got anything for them to work at in St. George. So I understand the number of people that supported and put your name on the bill. I understand that. Okay, I understand sometimes lots of people don't say lots of nothing, okay? I mean, I've been on boards. I've been just like you. I've had to vote on things too. And I've listened to people come in, and my daddy always told me, son, if you say something that people don't like, let them talk about you. Somebody else get a break, okay? And my thing is, I'm going to say what I mean, and I'm going to tell you how I feel. I've had 2 people, really 3 people speaking here today that I taught. 2 of them had their opinion. One of them had his opinion. I got my opinion. I still like them. I taught them and I coached them. Okay? And the bottom line is homework. Let's talk a little bit about homework. I don't know how many people have ever been in the swamp. I know Dr. Howard has been in the swamp, done a lot of work. I know Joe Hopkins has worked in the swamp. I know other people. Have any of y'all ever been in the actual swamp? You've been in the swamp. How deep did you go? Deep, or did you just use a little boat ride and go in and out? Okay, here's the homework. There are still a couple of original swampers that are left in Charlton County whose family went out there in 1858 and settled that swamp, the Chessers. In 1927, Mr. Tom Chester built a cabin there that's still there. That was renovated back in the early 70s. And it's a historic place, and people go and visit there, Chester Iron Homestead. They built that. And then, how many of y'all know Francis Harper? Oh, Jesus, we ain't got no homework done. Very little, okay. Francis Harper was a biologist from Cornell who came to the swamp to do a study of the flora and fauna, and I never knew what them words meant till I got into college. But he came and studied that swamp, and his wife, Jean, got upset because people were trying to do things in the swamp that wasn't right for the Chessers and the Lees and other things. So she wrote President Roosevelt, Franklin, who she had babysat his kids when she lived up at Hyde Park, and said, we need something done down here. And he got busy, and in 1937, they formed a federal act to develop the swamp and protect the swamp. What they didn't know, Mr. Francis Harper and his wife Jean, what they didn't know is they were fixing to drive all the swampers out of the swamp. The people he loved and that he stayed with and he wanted protected had to move because the federal government said you can't have guns out here, you can't shoot things out here, you can't do things out. Moved them out. Those people that had been there since 1858, Mr. Tom Chester, who built that cabin, was the last swamper to go. He left in 1958. 100 years later, he left. So what happened? These people got moved because somebody wanted to protect something. We want the swamp protected. All of us do. None of us want to see anything happen to the swamp. But we're into a debate of what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And I've listened to everybody talk up here today. Some of them said things I ain't got a clue what they said. Okay, y'all may not either. That happens. But the thing about it is, we got to listen. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate the job you do. I was never smart enough to be where you're at. I tried it one time and got beat. That's it. I don't want no more of it, okay? And I'm going to also tell you something. I don't know how many of you people get emails from people to support whatever. My wife, Joan, is here with me today. I was riding down the road with her the other day, and my representative, Mr. Corbett, who I've supported and I will always support, called me and said, look here, do you know that Joan Cruz has sent an email to me against Twin Pines? I said, do what now? And she was in the truck. She said, you talking about me, Joan Cruz? He said, yeah, I got an email that says you was against Twin Pines. She never sent it. She also sent one to Senator Mike Hodges. Never sent it. So how many of y'all and other people on committees are getting emails that they don't even know they sent? That's how politics works. Y'all know that. I ran for state rep in 2004, and I had a website set up that said I was for abortion and didn't even know I had it up there. I got beat, and that might not be the only thing that beat me because I was not for abortion. But I had it up there. Somebody done that and tried to beat me that way, and some of it probably helped them. But how many of y'all have got emails from people, and do you know they're really good emails or just something somebody's sending? Again, I thank you for being where you're at. You got a hard job. But I hope you've listened to the fact that nobody wants to see the swamp hurt. Nobody. But you know what? The first person that talked to here to y'all today was EPD man. If EPD says, hey, let them go on, we'll grant the permit, that's all our county told them. Take it to EPD. If they tell you fine, go ahead on. If they tell you no, thank you, it was nice meeting you, we'll see you later. Thank y'all very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Cruz. Representative John Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too agree with every member that's been up here to speak so far. I don't want to see the swamp harmed either. Everybody here, I've enjoyed that swamp since I was 15. I fished in Fargo with my father-in-law. Caught a ton of fish out there, probably more than we should have. But I started early. Just ask Dominic. I might bend the rules once in a while. But I've been at the entrance in Waycross. Probably since I got elected, I go there probably a half a dozen times a year. So I'm very engaged in the swamp and the activities going on there, and it needs to be protected. Everybody here has agreed to that. Now, with that being said, I rarely speak against a fellow member's bill. I just don't do it. I just rarely do that. But I've been called out here today as somebody that wouldn't sign her bill. Y'all heard that I'm got a constituent very upset because I wouldn't sign it. Well, let me explain why I won't sign that bill. You know, it walks all over private property rights. We're taking somebody's property and not compensating them. Now, if the lady would like to put something in the bill to where we compensate for what we're taking, I'm all in. Then we can have that conversation. But until that mechanism's in the bill, it goes against every fiber in my being, and it should concern every one of y'all. Anybody that owns land should run up a red flag. What this can do, you heard somebody testify. Well, we set the policy, and the EPD carries it out. If I can get 90 people to agree with me, I think these trees need protecting over here. I draw a circle around them and say, all right, you can't, no logging's going on right now, so we can protect those trees from being cut in the future. We can pass anything. That's not the way this system works. We've got what we're telling with this bill, House Bill 71, we're basically telling the EPD back here, look here, you're either incapable or incompetent of making a decision whether this can be done safely based on the facts that's presented to you. That's what we're telling the EPD. Now follow me here. This is the same EPD that for 20 years guided us through the water wars with Alabama and Florida. Madam Chair, was here. She fought those battles. We went all the way to the Supreme Court twice. This same EPD that carried that case to the Supreme Court twice and won. This is the same EPD. Now we're telling you don't have the expertise to make a determination if this can be done safely. That's what we're saying here. So I'm sorry. Our EPD, I've got 100% confidence in them. They've got the experience. They've got the track record. They can do this. Let them determine that. Now let's look at some facts. What the locals want. I've got in Commissioner Cruz has stated this, and I've got the unanimous resolution where they voted to support, if you get the permits, that they support what they're doing. That they need the economic development if they can get the permits. But if they can't, that's fine. If you don't get the permits, we don't want it. Nobody wants to do anything that's going to damage the swamp. He talked about the emails. I thought that, here's, I've been getting these emails, and probably every one of y'all have got them. I'm your constituent, and support House Bill 71, and you're reading it's got a name and an address, but no phone number. Because if I've got a phone number, I'll call them. I learned that from my good friend over here that's smiling. But you go back and look at where that email came from, and it's a mail agent at thesoftedge.com, every one of them. So when this came in Friday, it come in from Joan Cruz. And Jesse's coming up here to speak against this bill. So I said, Jesse, we got a problem.
I got on real quick too.
But I don't know, Chairman Perkins. I don't know if that's you just bending the truth or lying. No, it's lying. It's not true. We've talked about the water levels in the swamp. We've got a letter from back when the EPA was in jurisdiction over this. I think it was Thomas McGill, and the letter's in the file. He said, as proposed, the Twin Pine project would have no effect on the water level in the swamp. Then the EPD, letters from them stating the same thing, 2 letters, just in November and December. The second method they used in December, if they withdrew the water directly out of the swamp. In his letter, he said it would change the water level in the swamp 5 millimeters. I had to look that up. I had to convert millimeters to inches. It's 0.19, less than a quarter of an inch, if you drew it directly out of the swamp. So it's not going to affect the water levels. I've got a lot more. If more people wants to talk, so I'm going to cut my presentation short. But we had a presenter up here with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, speaking about the way Trail Ridge forms a boundary, a normal dam around it. Well, they've got a book. It's their book that they publish. And I would direct him to page 22. It talks about the 2 theories in the way, the swamp was formed. And the one that everybody has testified to here, Trail Ridge as being a dam, it states in the book that it's the most traditional and probably the most popular opinion. It states in the book, although probably incorrect. The book tends to put more weight on the second formation of it. So The book doesn't even agree with what they're saying, and this is our own book. You know, I'm gonna cut it short. At the end of the day, you know, everybody here that testified, most of them will go back to their gated communities, their yachts, their plantations, you know, whatever. Probably, you know, pat yourself on the back and say, hey, you know, we've given them a warm, fuzzy feeling. We've done a good thing. But let me tell you what they're not going to do. They're not going to go home tonight and wonder if they're going to be able to put a roof over their family's head. You know, they're not going to wonder if they can put food on the table. You know, if they can put clothes on their kids to send them to school. They're not going to worry about being able to send their kids to college. You know, I was talking to a deputy down there Friday. I went down there to a 4-H event. His daughter's going to North Georgia College, taking advanced mathematics and computer science. You know, when she gets through, she's not going to come home. There's no jobs. You know, she could probably teach at high school, but she can make more money elsewhere. So, anyway, what the question we need to ask, the only question that we need to ask, is can we do both? Can we have economic development and protect the swamp? And the ones that can make that decision is the EPD. Let's let them do their job.
Thank you, Representative Corbin, Mr. Chairman. Okay, we've got Mr. Lewis Jones. Got 16 minutes left. Yeah.
I'll try to go fast. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Lewis Jones. My firm is Jones Fortuna. My partner John Fortuna and I represent Twin Pines to get this permit. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. The first thing I want to do is apologize that Steve Engel, the president of Twin Pines, cannot be with us. We do have the environmental manager for the project, Mark Fowler, who's sitting here. And we also have a video presentation by Mr. Engel, which I'd like to play for you. It's just a couple minutes long. I don't know how to make that happen, though. Laptop.
Minerals. I'm sorry that I'm unable to be there in person with you today, but appreciate being allowed the opportunity to offer a brief overview of our mining to land reclamation project, for which we are in the public comment period of the permitting process. We propose to mine titanium and zircon on 582 acres of land in Charlton County, that at its closest point is 2.9 miles from the southeast corner of the Okefenokee Refuge boundary and even farther from the swamp itself. The actual mining footprint is both small and shallow, 1.5 to 2.5 acres in size, advancing 100 feet a day at a maximum depth of 50 feet. Sand and soils will be processed on site and simultaneously returned via conveyor to refill the mine pit in a continuous operation. The average time any given portion of the mining pit will be open is only 5 days, and present elevations and land contours will be restored. Our mining will be done utilizing an electric dragline. This process is cleaner and much more environmentally friendly versus the standard wet mining technique, which utilizes petroleum-powered equipment and a dredge and floating concentrator. Our plan focuses on more than simple replacement of sand and soils, but on restoration. This tract was part of an area that was commercially forested for more than a century. Following mining activities, we will enhance the property by planting indigenous pines. Once our mining and restoration activities have been completed, we plan to donate a significant portion of the property back to the state for a conservation site. Of highest importance to us is the protection of the Okefenokee and the surrounding environment. Aside from the altruistic belief that this is the right thing to do, it's just good business. There's no way we'd do anything to harm the swamp, which would expose us to regulatory action and put our investment on this project at risk. The mine will provide good paying jobs and economic development in Charlton County and the surrounding areas. This project is expected to provide between 100 and 200 full-time positions. The mine will also provide a significant boost to the local and regional economies while generating millions in state and local tax revenues. In fact, the project will almost double Charlton County's tax base when it is completed and has been expressly endorsed and is supported by the Board of Chairmen of Charlton County, the City of Folsom, and the Charlton County Development Authority, where all this activity is located. With the noted support of local leadership and many others in the community, including people who have inquired about employment opportunities, a lot of folks are ready to get to work, and so are we. Thank you for allowing me to offer these thoughts. Work of the Natural Resources Committee, and hope you will give us the opportunity to complete this project. With that, I would like to turn over to my colleagues who are with you in person today. Thank you.
All righty, Ms. Jones, you can continue when David gets you.
Left. Thank you. Well, I'm going to try to make a few points very quickly. And before I turn it over to the next witness, who I think is the more important of our team. The first point is that HB 71 is not needed to protect the Okefenokee Swamp. As we've already heard from the Director of EPD and others, the Okefenokee is already protected. The Georgia Surface Mining Act will not let this permit be granted if it cannot be done safely. If it can't be done safely, and if the claims that have been made can be verified by the scientists at EPD, there's not going to be mining on Trail Ridge. The only way that HB 71 plays a role is if we're able to prove that the mine is able to be done safely, because that's the only way this permit gets granted. You don't need a new law in order to stop it. Now, our opponents talk about science. But science requires critically evaluating claims. We don't do science in committees, and we don't do science, at least not this type of committee, and we don't do it in op-eds. Science is done by scientists. And so what we need to do is carefully evaluate these claims to separate fact from fiction and see which of these claims have merit and which don't. And we have a process. We have a whole agency that's dedicated to doing exactly that. So listening to the science in this case, it doesn't mean making a blanket prohibition on mining Trail Ridge. What it does is mean allowing the scientists at EPD to do the work and to do the evaluation. And let Dr. Jackson come forth with his evidence, and let us come forth with ours. And let's evaluate the science and see which claims have merit. That process, that rigorous process, is only going to result in a permit if the science shows that this can be done safely. And to that point, the next point that I want to make is that these minerals are valuable. The value of the minerals on Trail Ridge on Twin Pines property alone is in the billions. That's billions with a B and an S. And that's why we're here. If that value can be recovered and if it can be done safely, it's a tremendous benefit to the local and state and national economy that should be allowed to happen. And we should be allowed to show, and EPD should be given the space to determine if that value can be recovered safely and without hurting the swamp. Again, the question is if we can do both. And that's what we need EPD to determine for us. To the point that's already been raised, again, these are, the value wouldn't be in the billions if these minerals were abundant, as our opponents claim. They're on the critical minerals list for a reason. And the titanium dioxide is on the list, whether it is used as a pigment or as a metal alloy. In either case, the list explicitly says this titanium is in fact a critical mineral that we need. That's why it's so valuable. So by denying landowners the opportunity to prove that they can use this land and recover that value and do it safely by making a blanket prohibition instead of trusting the process that we have, that is a taking. It's a taking of private property. We've heard different views about that. What I can guarantee this committee is that those claims are going to be tested in court. And given the value at stake, this is a tremendous potential risk for the state of Georgia. We heard reference to the Coastal Marshlands Act. Marshlands belong to the state. The state can do it at once with marshlands. This is private property, and that's a whole different game. Okay. There are other points that we could address, but I'm out of time. I'm going to turn this over now to Dr. Pandey, Dr. Sorab Pandey. I just wanted to introduce him before he takes the mic. Dr. Pandey is our groundwater hydrologist. He's a principal engineer with GSI Environmental and a visiting professor at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. He is a nationally renowned groundwater modeling expert. In fact, after conducting a national search, our state hired Dr. Pandey to be Georgia's expert in the water wars case that was just referenced, to be the expert on groundwater issues for the state of Georgia in the United States Supreme Court. And his contributions to science are in fact widely recognized by his peers. In fact, the USGS turned to Dr. Pandey to write the ModFlow model, which is the tool that's used to analyze this type of question. Dr. Pandey in 2017 was inducted into the National Academy of Engineering, one of the highest honors that can be conferred on a scientist in this country. So Dr. Pandey is now going to take the mic and address some of the issues that we've heard today.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Dr. Pandey, if you come forward, it'd be great.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Sorab Pandey, and I'm here to talk about some of the work I have done to understand this issue and how the mining may impact the water resources. And the key points I wanted to talk about are these 5 points here. One is that Trail Ridge is not an earthen dam, but it's a groundwater divide. Trail Ridge, the groundwater divide is not going to be affected by the proposed mine. The mine pit dewatering will not affect water levels in the Okefenokee Swamp. The proposed mine will not affect flows in the St. Mary's River, and pumping from the Floridan Aquifer is not going to affect the Okefenokee Swamp. So starting off with, Trail Ridge is not an earthen dam. On the left, what you see is an earthen dam which backs up water against that dam. On the right is what we have at Trail Ridge, which is a groundwater divide. So you have a mound of groundwater, and everything on the west flows to the west, and everything on the east flows to the east. And the bottom right figure is actually from the model of Trail Ridge, showing exactly that it is a groundwater mound, and there's a groundwater divide, and there's flow. When it rains, even the surface water runoff is from the peak to the left and to the right of the mound, and same with groundwater. Groundwater also creates a mound, and it flows to the left and right. The second thing I want to talk about is that mining on Trail Ridge will not affect the groundwater divide. First of all, Trail Ridge is not going to be breached. The black outline that you see there is Trail Ridge. Down, the mine footprint is in blue below that, and as was mentioned earlier, the mining is done as an open pit which moves along the through the mined area, and those small dots that you see there, that is actually the open mine pit. There are 2 of them that have been pointed out with an arrow. And the mine moves according to that. So that will be the size of the active mine. And the third point there, final point, is that the bottom of the mine pit will always be higher than the swamp level. So it's not that it's going to even breach something and that there'll be drainage from that. So the mound will still be maintained. The next point I wanted to talk about was mine pit dewatering effects on the Okefenokee swamp will be negligible. What we can see again in the figure, that center line, there's the center line of Trail Ridge, the orange line. And then the mine footprint area is in there. And as we talked before, things from the ridge, it's a mound. So everything from the ridge to the left of the ridge will flow to the left, to the west, and everything on the east will flow to the east. Groundwater as well. The mine is not in the direction of flow to Okefenokee swamp. Actually, the first surface water body close to the mine there is the river Styx. And we have done some evaluations of what the impact would be. The river, so groundwater will flow towards the river Styx, and the river Styx flows north into the Okefenokee swamp. And just to give the lay of the land, the St. Mary's River flows from the swamp out southwards. So we've done some calculations, some modeling from that, and I will show you the results of that the effects are negligible. Sorry, this is a slide shows the modeling that we've done. The figure on the right shows the model itself, and what is in yellow are the wetlands and the river Styx, all the connected surface water bodies that would flow up to the Okefenokee swamp. So we've run the model pre-mining conditions, and we've run the model with the mine active pit being dewatered. And we see the difference between those 2 cases, and what we see are the effects are negligible. Again, the figure on the right here shows the water levels as it flows down from the ridge, and there is a blue lines of contour lines and there are orange contour lines. The orange contour lines are the pre-mining and the blue are for during mining, and they sit right on top of each other in that it's not affecting the water levels along the ridge. We also looked at how much water, what the difference is in the water flowing out to the wetlands, and that difference is negligible. It's we calculated it as 0.34 cubic feet per second, which is about 80 million gallons per year. Putting that in perspective, the volume in the swamp itself is 5,000 times as much. Putting that in perspective, the average rainfall over the area of the swamp every year is more than 7,000 times as much as the volume that's being pumped every year. So it's a really negligible amount. And when we looked at how much, if we just looked at the swamp as a bathtub and see how much the water level would be changed over 4 years of operation with this 80 million gallons per year, it would come to less than a fraction of an inch. Similarly, now, how does it affect flows to the St. Mary's River? We've seen this slide before, the figure to the right. The flow is to the river Styx first. The St. Mary's River is another 4 miles away, so the effect is going to be even less than the effect that we see to the river Styx. And the amount of water that flows to the river Styx, it flows through to the swamp, and the swamp is what actually feeds the St. Mary's River. And as we saw, the calculation showed that there's really negligible impact on the swamp water levels, so there will be negligible impact on the St. Mary's River as well. And finally, what would be the effect of pumping from the Floridan aquifer on the Okefenokee swamp? So we did a similar sort of calculation. First point is that once mining commences, the seepage water that comes out into the mine pit will be used. And pumping from the Floridan aquifer for mine operations will be minimal. The second point is that the Okefenokee swamp is separated from the Floridan aquifer by a thick clay unit called the Hawthorne Formation, and the Floridan aquifer pumping will not affect those seepage rates. Pumping in the Floridan aquifer first of all, it does not come directly out of the swamp. It comes out of the groundwater which comes out from all directions in the groundwater itself. And when we did the same calculation, assuming that all of that water just came out of the swamp, it again showed that over the 4-year period, the level of the swamp would be changed minimally by a fraction of an inch. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you. Yes, sir, Doctor. You hit it dead on it. You had about 2 seconds left, so dead on it. So your timing's good. Your timing's good. We've heard a lot of testimony today. I want to commend everybody for their emotions. I know we're emotional, but I think it's been a great meeting. I think we've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about it. Hope the committee members have learned a lot about it. The committee members are welcome to contact anybody in the audience and other people that may have testified that had to leave. We're, feel at will to do that and talk amongst yourselves. And we will call this meeting adjourned. And we thank you very much. Good job, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.